It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Labor Day weekend, a 3-day weekend. I always get a little sad at Labor Day because I know it kind of means the functional end of the summer, and I love the lazy, hazy days of summer, but now we get right down to the grind and back to business. And of course, on this show, we talk a lot about business, but we also talk a lot about politics. And incidentally, thank you so much for joining. We have a great audience. We have a big audience. The show has been a big success. And it's because we have people who care about our country, who listen to this show. I don't always get it right, but I try to play it straight. I'm a free market guy. I believe freedom and free enterprise and liberty are the basic building steps to a prosperous and a happy and good nation. And so we have to restrain the size of our government, which, by the way, is now just at the federal level, $7 trillion. You add another couple $1 trillion for our state governments, and then you add another $1 trillion for our local governments. And, you know, you're talking about 1/3 of our entire economy now, or more than 1/3, is government. And we have got to put a lasso on government and rein it in. It should be maybe 15%. I mean, I believe we could cut, seriously, I believe we would have a more prosperous and just nation if we could cut our government in half. I think we could do that in a snap because we've become so reliant on government, and it's become like a cancer cell. Government has become a cancer cell in our economy and our lives, and it will ruin this country if we continue to allow it to grow. And this has happened in the Republicans and Democrats. Most of those who have been following this show for the last few years know I'm not a rah-rah Republican. I'm not here to tell you, folks, that Republicans are going to solve our problems. I don't like the Democrats too much because I think they've become just an adjunct of government. They just want government to solve all our problems, and that is not going to work. And so now we have a Democratic nominee for president who really does believe that every problem is going to be solved by government. If we just grow the government, we have a government agency to deal with this program or that program, all our problems will go away. We'll be a just and joyful. She uses the word joy now. A joyful country if we just make the government and have more government bureaucrats running things. I don't know if you saw, folks, that in my hometown of Chicago, which is, as you all know, if you're regular listeners to the show, I love Chicago. I hate what's happened to the city, but I think it's an amazing city. And now what happened in Chicago was they had so many regulations and so much crime in the city that the grocery stores and the 7-Elevens and many of the little marts, they had to close down. They couldn't because all their merchandise was being stolen or the taxes were too high and people have been chased away. There weren't enough customers. And so now there aren't too many grocery stores and not a place to buy food in Chicago because they allowed crime. They said, look, if you steal less than $100, that's okay. You can run into the 7-Eleven, just grab all the candy bars and the Twinkies off the shelf and just walk out and don't worry, we're not going to prosecute for that. And all of a sudden they started shutting down the stores in Chicago. And so now this mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, has said, well, gosh, there's no grocery stores left. We're going to have the government run the grocery stores. I'm not making this up. The same people couldn't fight crime, couldn't run the schools, couldn't fix the potholes, can't keep the homeless off the street, can't do anything right. Now they're going to run the grocery stores in Chicago. And I tell you this because I guarantee you it's going to come to New York. It's going to come to San Francisco. It's going to come to Detroit and Milwaukee and St. Louis and every city because bad ideas travel fast when it comes to progressive politics. Well, we have a lot to talk about this afternoon, by the way, an action-packed show. I'm really pleased to announce that a guy who I've admired almost my whole life, Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, the who really created the Republican Revolution, will be coming on later in the show. I can't wait for that. We have Tom Bevan of the Real Clear Politics is going to talk to us about what's happening in this crazy race. Right now, it looks like it's a toss-up. I mean, every poll is just basically saying it's 50-50. Frankly, I'm kind of surprised that 50% of Americans are saying they would vote for Kamala Harris. I don't think she has too many good ideas. I don't think she knows what's going on with the economy. I think she has absolutely no knowledge of business. Incidentally, one of our you all know that I run a group called Unleash Prosperity. We have a major study coming out that I believe we're releasing on either Sunday or Monday. So I'm giving you a sneak preview on this. It's going to get a ton of attention. The New York Post is doing a major article on it that if you look at all of the people in the Biden-Harris administration, and then you look at the people who are working for Harris on her campaign and the people she's thinking about, if she wins, who would be in her cabinet, we found that the vast majority of these people have almost no business experience whatsoever. And I'm not talking about no business experience running a business. I mean, even getting a paycheck for a business, working for a business. Most of them are either government workers or they are academics who've spent their whole life in universities and schools, but have never actually gone out and run a business or work for a private business. Many of them are, what did Barack Obama call himself? Yeah, community organizer. That's not exactly running a business. Or lawyers. And many of them are lawyers. And I don't have anything against lawyers, except we have way too many of them in this country right now. And so, you have a situation where you would be putting someone in charge of the country who doesn't know anything about how to run anything. I think that's a bit of a gamble, folks, but it could work out, but I think it would be a gamble not worth taking. And meanwhile, you have Donald Trump, who has his whole career running a business. And I know people have very, very different opinions about Trump and his behavior and some of the things he says and the name calling. And I don't like that stuff, folks. I don't like it. I'm friends with Donald Trump. I've worked for him. I have great admiration for what he did for our country, but I don't like the name calling. And I don't like, the antics sometimes of Donald Trump. But I do say this, that if it just comes down, let me put it like this. If you're going to vote your pocketbook, if you're going to vote about the kitchen table issues, can I pay my bills? Can I send my kids to college? Can I take a vacation this year? Am I have enough money to pay the rent and the grocery bills? Do I have enough money maybe to start a little business? How's my 401k plan doing? Am I be able to retire with enough money so that I can live comfortably, or at least not become destitute? Then if you're going to vote those issues, then you're going to vote for Donald Trump. It's that simple. I mean, there's no comparison. If you look at, many of you know, I talk about this every week, go to unleashprosperitynow.com and get our, what we call our chart book. We call the Trump boom versus the Biden-Harris bust. And you look at almost every measure of the economy, whether it's 401k plans, whether it's the stock market, whether it's real take-home pay, whether it's the price of gasoline, whether it's your mortgage rate. I could go on and on. Small business conditions, all these, every single one of them, with maybe one or two exceptions, shows that Trump trumps Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I mean, on almost every one of them, the performance of the economy was better under Trump, and that even includes the COVID year, which I don't think Trump handled COVID all that well, but he certainly didn't cause COVID. And of course, as bad as his performance was, Biden's performance on dealing with COVID was even worse. More people died from COVID under Joe Biden than did under Donald Trump. And so we have we have something big to think about here, folks. We have some big issues to think about. I wanted to mention this new tax plan that Kamala Harris has come out with. It was announced the other day by the New York Times. It is a $5 trillion tax. Well, the New York Times called it a $5 trillion tax increase. It actually is, to give Kamala the benefit of the doubt, is 4.6 trillion. Trillion, that's 4.6 trillion, not billion. A reporter from the Washington Post asked me the other day, Steve, is this the biggest? This reporter, she said, I'm going to call this the biggest tax increase in American history. I said, no, it isn't. It's the biggest tax increase in the history of the world. We've never seen anything like this. She wants to raise the capital gains tax. She wants to raise the dividend tax. She wants to raise the small business tax. She wants to raise the corporate tax. It's always going to be somebody else, right, who's going to pay these taxes. Now, you wouldn't be listening to this show if you weren't smart enough to know that businesses don't pay taxes. You know that. The businesses pass that on in many ways. Not always, not entirely, but those costs, if you make it more expensive for somebody to make an ice cream cone, what do you think is going to happen to the price of the ice cream? I mean, it's going to rise, right? This is rocket science. And so you've got this massive tax increase on top of $2 trillion of new spending that she's proposed. And I find that to be very worrisome. And to then just say, well, these businesses are just going to have to stop price gouging when there's no evidence that there's much price gouging going on. And for somebody who has no business experience to say, you're making too much profit. Kamala, I've got an idea. Why don't you and Tim Wirtz start a business, make a profit, and let us know how easy it is? Because 2 out of 3 small businesses fail. It is not easy to run an efficient company. Okay, I want to switch gears before I get to my first guest coming up. And I want to make one last point. Many of you know I do some work with the Heritage Foundation. I think Heritage does amazing work. And they do an analysis that's been coming out every year now for, I don't know, at least the last 20 years. It's called the Index of Economic Freedom, the World Index of Economic Freedom, where they look at all of these measures of things like, do you have low taxes? Do you have a responsible government? Do you have property rights? Which is really critical. Do you have freedom to trade? I'm trying to think of some. Is there corruption in your government? They have an index for how corrupt your government is. And by the way, our government is becoming more and more corrupt every day. And so they look at these things. Do you have a light touch of regulation, or do you overregulate are you socialist or are you free market? Do you have the government running the businesses, or do private sector companies do it? Anyway, so if you looked at go back, pre-Obama, and the United States always ranked in the top 5 in economic freedom of all the countries. I think there's like 180 countries. And the United States was always, second, third, fourth. I think it was always like Switzerland and Singapore that had the freest economies, and Hong Kong at that time. But Hong Kong isn't free anymore either because the Chinese took that over. And here's the thing I wanted to relate to you folks. In the latest index of economic freedom, we're supposed to be the land of the free, right? Our ranking is now, out of 180 countries, we're number 25. Number 25? 25? We went from number 3 or 4 to number 25 in 10 years? What the heck is going on here, folks? I mean, come on. We are losing our freedoms. We are moving in a socialist direction. And I guarantee you, if Kamala Harris comes in and does the things she's talking about, we are going to move from 25 to 30, 50. We're going to have countries like Uganda, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, Ukraine that will be freer than we are. Nigeria, come on. We're supposed to be the land of the free. We cannot allow this to happen. And we have to safeguard our freedoms. It is our responsibility as citizens to protect our freedoms. How many tens of millions of Americans have lost their lives protecting this country? And we cannot give up these freedoms. And so I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, guard your freedom, because freedom is a cherished and a rare feature of any country. Most countries aren't free. We take for granted the freedoms we have. If we keep doing that, we're going to lose them. And America's special place as a beacon of freedom for the rest of the world will be lost. That's my warning for this week. We'll be right back. We got an action-packed show. We're on for 2 hours now on the More Money Show on WABC and many affiliates throughout the country. And thank you to those who are listening online. This is the More Money Show.
Talk Radio 77. WABC. This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. First guest of the afternoon is a longtime friend and a comrade and a brother in arms, Mark Skousen, who is the founder of one of the most important conferences held every year called Freedom Fest. And if you've not been to Freedom Fest, folks, you've got to go. It's 3,000 to 5,000 people who love liberty, love freedom, love the free enterprise system, some of the best speakers, some of the best events you'll ever see. And then Mark Skousen is also the presidential scholar professor at Chapman University and is one of the wisest economists I know. So I wanted to talk to Mark. And by the way, Mark, thanks for coming on this afternoon.
Hey, my pleasure. And by the way, on Freedom Fest, we're going to be in California for the first time.
Where?
At Palm Springs. Yeah, in Palm Springs, California. So it's going to be very exciting.
I can't wait for that. I've been a regular attendee for, 20. How many years has it been for Freedom Fest?
Well, since 2007. So we're heading up to 18 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really a great conference. So if people want
when will that? When is it this? When is it this in 2025?
It's June this time. Normally it's July, but it's June 11th through the 14th. And if people go to freedomfest.com, they'll get all the details.
Okay. So the reason I wanted to have Mark on is, Mark, I am very concerned about the profession that you and I are in, which is the economics profession, and especially in the universities, but also on Wall Street. I see kind of a takeover of the economics profession by kind of the more radical left socialist Keynesians. It seems to me that in this kind of environment, it would be hard for an Adam Smith or a Milton Friedman to get a job.
Yeah, it's not only, I wrote this article in the Wall Street Journal about this really very popular professor who advocates free market economics and teaches a class at Austrian economics at Occidental College, or known as Oxy, in Los Angeles. Yeah. And he was kicked out. He'd been there for 14 years, and they
didn't he have tenure?
No, he did not have tenure. He was basically an adjunct, but he was very popular. He filled in all the different classes, econometrics and stuff like that. Very high ratings, and 400 students. They only have 1,800 students at Oxy, and 400 students signed a petition saying, hey, this guy is great. Why are you getting rid of him? And it turns out that he's the only free market economist, not only in the economics department, but in the entire university. So they are gradually doing this, and it's all over the country. In University of Arizona, the Goldwater Institute talked about something like that. And what I wanted to mention was the AEA itself, the American Economic Association, has gone totally woke. And their conference that they have every January, they basically are squeezing out all the free market people, or most of them, in terms of they have 42 sessions out of the 500 sessions in January. They just printed their preliminary agenda. They have 42 on diversity and inequality and race and all of this stuff. But do they have room? We proposed a session on Hayek, because Friedrich Hayek is celebrating his 50th anniversary of his Nobel Prize. And we thought, well, let's do a session on that. Even though we had two women on the session, including Barbara Kohm, who you know from Vienna, who's going to fly out there at her own expense, they still canceled or they rejected our session. Meanwhile, they have sessions honoring Robert Solow, the Keynesian economist at MIT who passed away last year, and Ben Bernanke, who actually engineered the financial crisis of 2008. They're honoring him with the Nobel Prize, as you know.
So this is a very disturbing thing for anyone who cares about economics and our economy and how it functions. There's a right way to be thinking about economics, and there's a wrong way. And it's pretty clear to me the free market has worked everywhere it's been tried, and socialism has failed everywhere it's been tried. And so they can't even get that right. But look, what worries me is one of the reasons that you have tenure. And by the way, I'm opposed to tenure, but the reason the universities have tenure is they always say, well, this is to protect people who have a view that might not be politically popular. And yet, who are the people that they are firing as the people who have opinions that they don't find popular? And those are free market positions. And so it seems to me there's a kind of indoctrination going on in these schools that is not at least exposing them to the other side of the story.
Yeah, and you can see this in the textbooks as well. They have this new textbook that they replaced Greg Mankew's textbook out of Harvard. He's probably the most popular textbook writer in the country. And he's somewhat pro-free market. I mean, he starts with the classical model, and he's even though he gives the position of the Keynesian model, it's at the end of the textbook. Well, they replaced his textbook with another one by this gal named Becky Stevenson. And she is, what's really funny is that they chose hers over Mankiw because she used the her and the she more than he did. They had this whole study. Right. So they've gone woke in so many ways. Now, fortunately, we do have Tyler Cowen from GMU has a textbook. We have
That's George Mason University. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have Gortney and Stroop from, I'm trying to think, at Florida State. So there are, and Roger Leroy Miller, there are free market textbooks out there. But, and also Sean Flynn, who writes the McConnell Brew textbook. So it is a battle that's going on. And I haven't given up this battle. I speak at universities all the time on my title. You'll love my title that gets a lot of students coming. The title is What's Better Than Democratic Socialism? And of course, students are saying, well, what could possibly be better than democratic socialism? And of course, the answer is democratic capitalism. And I talk about the stakeholder philosophy where workers benefit as well as the executives and the CEOs. Students really love this solution and as an alternative, because you can't get rid of a bad idea unless you replace it with a good idea. So I promote this idea of democratic capitalism.
So why you've been on university campuses for a long time, taught at a lot of schools, and it is deeply disturbing to me that our schools are not teaching Americans the freedom message, that freedom should prevail, and that big government is something that is not only bad for your liberties, but it's also bad for your economy. And I don't really get it, why it is that these universities are so populated with leftists and that there's essentially no room, unless you go to, some of these schools that are overtly conservative, for a free market conservative position.
Yeah, and one of the reasons for this is the Marxists do have an agenda. We don't. We're like a herd of cats. We go wherever we go, and we don't have an agenda. The Marxists and the socialists have an agenda. They come in, there's one person in the department, and they get another one, and eventually they take over the department. And we don't do that. And that's even the University of Chicago now, I don't think have any pure free market economists left. Maybe John
Casey Mulligan is there, and he's,
and Casey, but they're a small minority now. Since all of the Nobel Prize winners, Friedman and Becker, they've all died, and the new ones, it's a small minority, unfortunately, and so there is this transition that's going on. I'm fighting it at the AEA meetings, and elsewhere. And John Stossel, by the way, has done a really good job because he gets into all of the schools with his both sides of the issue type of thing. So he interviews both sides of the issue, and that way he does get into a lot of the schools and education and the institutions. So
funny.
I'm not pessimistic that we have lost this battle, but it is a battle going on, and people who are donating money to the Fund for American Studies or the Cato Institute or what have you, we need to specialize in really working on changing the education that students are getting. And I'm not saying that everybody has to be a free market economist. We just need our view presented to the students. They love it when they hear it. I mean, at Chapman University, I teach free market economics. And I was even told at Chapman that we have statues of Milton Friedman and Ronald Reagan and Ayn Rand on our campus in California. but most of the students are taught Keynesian economics in their classrooms.
So for parents that want to send their kids, or parents or students that want to go to a school that will teach them classical economics, the way the world works. It used to be you had University of Chicago, UCLA, schools like that would really teach the free market system. And by the way, it's really the only system that works. So it's ahistorical to say that socialism works or Keynesianism works. What schools, can you point to 4 or 5 schools out there that you think, are good schools to go to if you want to learn the free market system?
Well, I certainly think George Mason University is one of the top schools.
That's where I got my degree. I got my master's at George Mason.
That's right. And their economics department is still very free market. I would say Chapman University. I mean, we have Vernon Smith, we have myself, we have Jim Doty, who is the former president of Chapman, who's a libertarian. So there are some schools out there that offer this. Northwood University in Michigan, certainly, and then Hillsdale. You can't forget Hillsdale is a great undergraduate institution. They've done.
What about Clemson?
Well, Clemson does have some free market economists there, have in the past. I don't know how many are still around at Claremont, but that's certainly a possibility.
And a lot. We got only 30 seconds left. We've got most of our listeners, not all of them, but most of them are in the New York metropolitan area. What about New York University? What about Columbia?
NYU in the past has had some free market economists there, and I think there's 1 or 2 left, so that's a possibility as well. But it's not. NYU now has Paul Krugman, so you can imagine what
the worst economists in the country. Well, Mark Skousen, I will be there in June of 2025. One more time, where will Freedom Fest be this year? What dates, and how do people learn about it?
It's Palm Springs, California, and it's June 11th through the 14th, and next year. And if people go to freedomfest.com, they can learn all about it. It's going to be
it's a great conference. Yeah, so always is. Mark Skousen, thanks so much for joining. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. This is the #1 talk radio station in these United States. And a great shout out to my good friend John Catsimatidis, who is the owner and operator of this radio station and has completely turned it around into a real powerhouse in media today. And so now I'm so pleased to introduce my next guest. I always tell you, folks, I'm not the greatest radio talk show host, but I get some of the best guests to come on the show and educate us. And so I'm so pleased to welcome House of Representatives Speaker Newt Gingrich. Newt, thanks so much for joining this afternoon.
Oh, I'm delighted to do it. And you do such amazing work, and your newsletter is so important that it's always a privilege to do things with you.
So thank you so much. There's so much to talk about. I wanted to first start with something that made me think of you when I was listening to Kamala Harris speak the other day. And by the way, you all, I think almost everyone listening to this show knows that one of the great political revolutions of our time, and I call it a freedom revolution, was really engineered by Newt Gingrich. And he is the man who is the Speaker of the House. How many times did we balance the budget? 3, 4?
4 times in a row.
4 times in a row. It's the only time in my lifetime that has happened, folks. The only time was when Newt Gingrich, and I remember, Mr. Speaker, when you made that announcement at the beginning of 1995 that we were going to balance the budget, and the media their jaws dropped because it had never happened before. Well, let me start with that. How did it happen? How were you able to do something that no one thought was possible?
Well, we combined willpower with an intelligent team approach. We had people like John Kasich as chairman of budget, Dick Armey as majority leader.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really a first-rate group. Tom Bliley at Energy and Commerce. Everybody pitched in. Everybody was committed. The interesting thing is we invited in every Wednesday night. The roundtable hosted 10 to 15 CEOs. And we'd have dinner at the Capitol, and we would say to them, look, we're going to balance the federal budget. And at that time, the deficit was about the size of the General Motors annual sales, which was one of the largest companies in the U.S. Yeah. And I said, so we've got to solve this. If you were faced with this as a CEO, what would you do? And consistently, week after week, they said three things. Set very tight deadlines for very large change. Delegate like crazy, so lots of people are helping you get it done.
Right. Yep.
Allow no experts in the room because they will tell you what can't be done.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Those are the three principles we followed.
And so yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say, and they worked. That was the cool thing.
So the cool thing also was you did this without raising a penny of new taxes, as I recall.
Well, in fact, we cut the capital gains tax, the largest capital gains tax cut in history. We cut the tax on your house. So if you bought a new house, you paid no capital gains on the old house. And we passed welfare reform with a huge incentive to go back to work.
That's fantastic.
And it all worked. And by the way, one of the things that maybe you can get one of your friends to do a study on it. We set out to remodernize Washington, D.C., using tax policies and approaches that would give both individuals buying a house and businesses looking to invest a huge incentive. And for about 20 years, we dramatically turned around D.C. until the corrupt Democratic machine just decided that, they wanted to go back to the stuff that never works. But it's one of the great case studies of how the right public policies can take an area that looks like it's hopeless and in a matter of a year or two, begin to turn it around.
So one of the things that has changed in my political career, I arrived in Washington in 1985, and I think you arrived about the same time. But back then, we did have some moderate, centrist, sensible Democrats who believed in balanced budgets and believed in lower tax rates. And I have to say, I could probably count on one or two hands the numbers of Democrats in the House and Senate today that believe in a free enterprise system, that believe in growth, that believe that we need to, that are pro-business. What happened?
Well, I think part of it was a methodical effort to drive people out. The number of Democrats who came to see me, as late as passing the Reagan tax cuts, which were the key to prosperity in the 1980s, we got about a third of the Democrats. Yeah. And what happened was the left began to methodically punish them and to drive them out of their party. And the result was that year after year, it became harder and harder to find people who were willing to stand up with us because they knew that they'd be punished by their caucus. It was an amazing process to live through. And, of course, what it did ultimately is it gave us a lot of those seats because there were people who would say, well, if this is the future, then I'm going to quit. And that when they quit, we very often would pick up their seat because they were actually much more moderate than the Democrat who tried to replace them.
I think that's right. I think there were also two big things that happened. The progressives are not stupid, and they pulled off two incredible coups, in my opinion. I'd love your thoughts about this. One was when they elevated Nancy Pelosi to the speakership, and she was way to the left of the speakers of the past, like people like past Democratic speakers that had run Washington. And then, of course, they elected Barack Obama. And so they very systematically took over the major positions of the party. And it's never been the same since. One observation, and I'd love your thoughts about this. I remember very vividly when you came up with the Contract with America, and you had that, what was the first 100-day agenda? I think it was the first 100-hour agenda where you changed so much in just 3 or 4 days. But I remember the media saying, oh, this is the most radical agenda. And then when you put these things up for a vote, I think on a lot of those items, you got a lot of Democrats to vote for these things.
Well, yeah. In fact, in our biggest single achievement, which was welfare reform, we split the Democratic Party evenly, 101 in favor, 101 opposed.
That's amazing.
But we did it because we followed Lincoln's principle. Lincoln once said, with public sentiment, anything is possible. Without public sentiment, nothing is possible. And so we worked very, very hard to make sure that we knew where the American people were.
So that brings us to today, where I started by saying that you were very famous for talking about something that Jack Kemp, my old friend Jack Kemp, the great late Jack Kemp, used to talk about an opportunity society. And that was one of your themes, of creating an opportunity society. Now I hear Kamala Harris using that language, Mr. Speaker, that the Democrats are going to create the opportunity society. So sure. How would you rebut that?
Well, I mean, first of all, they lie.
Right.
Second, I had an opportunity one time to spend some time with Lee Kuan Yew, the great statesman who created modern Singapore. And I asked him, how were you able to be so unbelievably successful at creating an enormously wealthy city-state when it really wasn't when he took over? He said, I was a graduate student in England during the first Socialist Labour Party government after World War II. And every time I was faced with a major decision, I asked myself, what would Clement Attlee, the socialist prime minister, do? I would then do the exact opposite.
That's really funny. And it worked.
So I would start to say, if you look at the speech she gave in North Carolina the week before the convention, she has a prescription for a depression. I mean, if we actually passed some of her dumber tax ideas, it would be a nightmare. And I don't know at a practical level how you could actually implement it because it's so dumb.
It is, and it's just dumb and it's frightening. And you mentioned the fact that you were able, with the Democratic president back then, Bill Clinton, to pass a reduction in the capital gains tax. And incidentally, I think you know this, but when we cut the capital gains tax, guess what happened to capital gains revenue? They went through the roof. So did the stock market, because when you tax something less, you get more of it. So we got more investment, more businesses created, a lot of capital flowed in the United States. Now you've got a situation with, as I read the current version of the Kamala Harris tax plan, I don't know what it's going to be tomorrow or the next day because she keeps changing her mind. But right now she's talking about doubling the capital gains tax, which I think it would reduce the value of stocks by 30% if you did that, because the value of any share of stock falls as you increase the tax on it. I mean, how could they possibly come up with these ideas that have been tested? I mean, go back, I was listening to an old speech by John F. Kennedy, and he talked about how important it was that we have more capital investment. And the best way to do that was to reduce the capital gains tax. That was a Democrat.
Right. But you have to realize the modern left-wing Democratic Party believes in big government socialism. I mean, I was telling a friend earlier that I thought it was very ironic that, Bernie Sanders honeymooned in Moscow. And I would always tell people, you're living in Vermont. It's cold. You're surrounded by trees. Right. You could take your bride to the Caribbean, or you could go to Moscow, which is cold, and you're surrounded by trees. Well, guess what? Vice President Harris picked a guy in Governor Walz who has had 30 trips to China. So you can take your choice. Do you want a Russian-inspired socialist in Sanders or a Chinese communist-inspired socialist in Walz? And that's where the modern Democratic Party is. I mean, these people are Looney Tunes.
You're listening to the More Money Show. This is your host, Steve Moore, and my guest, of course, is the great Newt Gingrich. And I wanted to mention something. I know we have only a few minutes left with you, Mr. Speaker, but in my lifetime, I feel privileged that I've kind of lived through, three revolutions, if you will. I think the first, obviously, was the Reagan Revolution in 1980, which really changed the world and saved the world, in my opinion. And then there was the Newt Gingrich Revolution of the mid-'90s, which restored our financial and economic health. and through, as you said, just common sense reforms. And then we had the Trump revolution, and the media despises Donald Trump. I mean, it's even, I mean, they didn't like you too much, but and so you've gone through what Trump has, but it's even worse with Trump. Why do you think they hate him so much?
Well, I just wrote a piece for the New York Sun arguing that for the first time since FDR won in 1932, we're about to see the politics of right versus left replaced by the politics of reform versus corruption. And I think and this includes, by the way, the never Trump Republicans, all the elements of the old order who have to lie, they have to steal. There was between $100 and $150 billion stolen in COVID money, just to give you one example.
Yeah, right.
You have Boeing, which is a total outrage and ought to be a major scandal. NASA took one particular mission and took it away from Boeing and gave it to Elon Musk company, and they saved $2 billion on one mission.
Yeah,
and you look at this stuff, you realize that the system's now so sick that organizing politics around honesty and accountability and common sense is a revolutionary act, and it threatens everybody in the old order. And that's why people like Trump are hated, because Trump basically is a survival threat to the old order. And so you're talking about taking away their money, their prestige, their power, and they don't like that.
I think you're 100% correct. And I think I would just add to what you just said. The other big key to this is what I call the climate change industrial complex. And this is now a $1 trillion industry, $1 trillion. And this, I always say the green revolution isn't green as in green environment. The green revolution is about green money. And so Trump and people who believe, as you do and I do, that we should have a free enterprise system are a threat to this empire they have built. Their jobs depend on winning this election. If we lose, I'm going to be heartbroken. And I think Trump is going to win, but I'll be very heartbroken for our country. But, I'll go on because my job isn't dependent on government, but theirs are.
That's right. I mean, what you have is that the old order is so deeply invested in having to have the money that this is why they're willing to cheat. It's why they're willing to, plus their prestige is invested. They become nobody. They end up being professors at Yale writing about a world that disappeared.
It's really amazing thing. So, one last thing on the way out then, Mr. Speaker. I always ask this question to my guests, especially people who are very close to President Trump, as you are. What piece of advice would you give him? We've got the people start voting in about 3 or 4 weeks. So the window is closing much faster than a lot of people think. What would you tell him to be doing differently? Right now, you got basically a toss-up race. How do you? What does he got to do to win?
Well, I would say 2 things. Focus consistently on the policy differences and the record differences that are so huge. And describe it in terms that affect people's lives personally. And he does a fair job of that. But if he would focus on it and not give the media an excuse to distort what he says, he'd be better off. And then this may surprise you. I said this morning, having watched the Kamala Harris interview last night on CNN, I think as an act of compassion, he should allow her to bring Governor Walz to the debate. Because as I watched last night, I realized Governor Walz's real purpose is to be a personal support candidate.
Yeah, can she call timeouts and say, "Hold on, I've got to huddle up with my consultant here."
Or if she doesn't do well, he can reach over and pat her on the shoulder. But if you think about it, it's like having a personal support dog or something. I mean, he was really there as her personal support candidate, and I just think as a matter of compassion, Trump ought to say, "Look, if you want Walz to be there, he can't speak. But if you want me to stand next to you and pat you on the shoulder occasionally, that'll be fine.
Well, I listened to the answer about what are you going to do on the first day, and I'm still not sure what she's going to do on the first day, but she cares about the middle class.
I'll give you a Kamala Harris answer. The first day will be a very important day because it'll be the first day, and that's why on the first day, we should do all the key things on the first day that one should do because it's a very important day.
You must be writing her speeches. Newt Gingrich, Speaker of the House, a man who changed America in such an amazing way. I so much appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on, and I hope you'll do it again before the election. Folks, this is the More Money Show on WABC. We'll be right back.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the second hour of the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I hope everybody's having a great Labor Day weekend and getting out. And, this is sort of the official last weekend of summer. So get out, get exercise, get fresh air, but listen to More Money Show. By the way, we're on all over this country. We're obviously our flagship is right in the heart of New York City, but we also have listeners from affiliates throughout the country. We get callers calling in from as far north as Maine and as far south as Florida, and we have people calling from the West Coast as far as Arizona. So it's been an amazing run, and this is, I think, our third or fourth year. So thank you so much for joining in. As we start the second hour, I want to give you, if I may, a little economic lesson, because this is important that people understand how our economy works, because we have so many people in Washington and in academia, frankly, and even in the economic faculties of some of the top universities who do not understand the basic ABCs of a thriving economy and a healthy economy. And that's why we don't have a healthy economy, because we have nitwits running our economy. So I'm going to read you this press release, and you're going to all think about what's wrong with what they're saying in this press release. So it says, this just came out a few days ago. The Department of Energy report shows clean energy jobs grew at more than twice the rate of overall U.S. employment. According to the study, they created how many jobs was this? Something like 15,000 jobs in these clean energy industries. And so here's the thing about this story that I find fascinating. We have given away at least $100 billion. $100 billion to the green energy. So if you give me $100 billion, folks, I promise, I have my hand on the Bible right now, I will create jobs if you'll just give me $100 billion. I'll create a lot of jobs. I'll create 10,000 jobs. I promise. Just give me $100 billion and I will do it. This sort of reminds me of the old Steve Martin joke when he said, you can make $1 million and pay no taxes. And then he says, okay, step one, get $1 million. Well, we're going to get the $1 million. And so here's where these green energy companies get their $1 million, in this case, $100 billion. They get the money from Washington, from taxpayers. You and I gave this money to these companies. And so now they're boasting, well, boy, we created 10,000 jobs because, hey, we should give another $100 billion. And so what is the fallacy of this? I think a lot of you who've had even basic economics know the fallacy. This is a recitation of a logic error that goes back hundreds of years. And one of the greatest economists who ever lived, named Frederick Bastiat, who lived in the early 1800s, unmasked this idiotic flaw that you see encapsulated in this Department of Energy report. And what he talked about, Frederick Bastiat, was that this was 175 years ago. He wrote this famous essay called that which is seen and that which is not seen. And what did he mean by this? I'm going to read this to you because this was written 175 years ago, but it is so true. Okay. In the sphere of economics, an action, a habit, an institution, or law engenders not just one effect, but a series of effects. Of these effects, only the first is immediate. It is revealed simultaneously with its cause. It is seen. The others merely occur successively. They are not seen. We are lucky if we foresee them. The entire difference between a bad and a good economist is apparently here. A bad economist relies on the visible effect, while the good one takes account both of the effect that they can see and the effect that they cannot see. Why can't these economists in the Biden administration understand this? So in other words, to simplify this, what the Biden people are doing is talking about the seen effect. Oh, we gave them all this money and they created 10,000 jobs. We gave them $100 billion and they created 10,000 jobs. But is that the only effect here? Of course not. Where did the $100 billion come from? There's no tooth fairy in economics. I mean, only a 6-year-old believes in the tooth fairy. That money had to come from someone or someplace. And that money came from hardworking people and companies, and it was extracted from them. So you take $100 billion from companies, that's $100 billion they can invest to build the things they build, to give people the services they want. So we extracted that $100 billion and gave it to these people where their only virtue is the fact that they're close to the politicians, and they created these 10,000 jobs. And what Bastien is saying, how many jobs would have been created in that $100 billion if we never took it from the companies and the businesses and the individuals in the first place? Probably 3 times more jobs. They wouldn't have created 10,000 jobs. They created 30 or 50 or 100,000 jobs. And so this is a mythology that the government, all this government spending causes jobs. And I hear this myth repeated over and over and over. It's a fallacy. If this were the way to create jobs, then let's take everything away from us. Let's take all of our money, not just $300 billion. Let's take $3 trillion. I mean, let's see, our GDP is now I think it's about $25 trillion. I haven't looked, somewhere in that neighborhood, about $25 trillion of GDP. Well, let's take, 15 trillion of that. And geez, just think of all the jobs the government could create if they took $15 trillion. Of course, we would have a socialist economy and we would collapse. And so this is junior high school economics, but it's an error that is repeated continuously. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of people not understand, and people in important positions. I mean, even some of these economics professors, we even have people who've won Nobel Prizes in economics who don't understand one of the most important laws of economics. And I'm going to repeat this again. It's called the law of the seen and unseen. And Frederick Bastiat warned us of this 175 years ago, and we still have crazy people reciting this fundamental fallacy of how a government works. Second thing I wanted to mention very quickly, if I may, is I like to repeat some of the latest crazy ideas that come out of these green energy people, the climate change people. As you know, I firmly believe that climate change is not a science. Climate change is now the religion. It is a religion of the left. And so they can't be talked out of, you can't talk facts with people who are talking religion. It would be like, and I'm a Christian, it'd be like trying to say to a Christian, Christ is not the savior. Well, you're not going to be able to persuade them of that because it's a faith. A religion is based on faith. Well, climate change is based on faith. It's not based on any scientific evidence. There are many, many incredibly smart, brilliant scientists who find that a lot of what these climate change people are saying is just wrong. And there have been so many times throughout history where the conventional wisdom has been wrong. And so anyway, I like to point out the kind of crazy things that these climate change people want. And there's a new book that was just released that's getting a lot of attention, of course, in the media. And this book is talking about how we have to get rid of refrigeration. See, refrigeration is the problem because refrigeration is emitting greenhouse gases and it's causing a warming of the planet, according to these folks. And this woman who wrote this book, and I'm looking up for the title of it. I don't have it right in front of me. I apologize for that. But what she's saying is refrigeration is a big, big problem. And therefore, you don't have to eat things like tomatoes in off season. You should only eat tomatoes in the spring and the summer when the tomatoes are ripe and you don't have to refrigerate them. And so stop eating refrigerators in the winter, folks. Stop. If you do that, you're going to destroy the planet. So just stop doing it. Now, I remember when I grew up, we were taught to eat our fruits and vegetables and not just eat fruits and vegetables in the summer months, but to eat them year round. And I believe there's a lot of truth to that. I eat a banana every morning. Every morning I eat a banana. It's good for you. And I try to eat an apple every day. Fruits and vegetables are good for you, but nope. Stop eating fruits and vegetables because we're not going to have the refrigeration. We're going to get rid of the refrigeration, and that way we're going to save the planet. Now, here's one of the things that I think is so sinister about these kind of ideas. Refrigeration is probably saved, I'm guessing, but I may be off by, I may be off, but I'd say probably 100 million people have been saved by refrigeration. Refrigeration has reduced foodborne illnesses by 90%. It used to be people died from eating rotten food or food that has been spoiled, and then it gets into your system and it kills you. Meat or chicken or pork, you don't refrigerate it and you eat it. It can be rancid and you can die. A lot of millions and millions and millions of people have died from foodborne illnesses over the past millennium. It wasn't until we had refrigeration that we brought those rates way, way down. Incidentally, I am old enough to remember when I was really a little kid, I remember ice boxes. I remember in the old days, you are old enough to remember, they would literally have people deliver ice to put in your ice box to keep things cold. That was the original refrigerators. And now we have chemicals that allow us to refrigerate our food and our meat and our ice cream. And the left wants to get rid of that. These are the forces we're up against, folks. They want to get rid of ice cream. How are you going to have ice cream without refrigeration? And that's where I say, damn it, no. They are not going to take away my mint chip ice cream for dessert. That's where I draw the line. Okay, folks, this is the More Money Show. I'll be right back. We have some wonderful guests coming up, and I hope, again, that you're having a great Labor Day weekend.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. I am your host, Stephen Moore. Thanks so much for taking a little time out of this holiday weekend to talk about the economy and finances and some politics. And my next guest is Gary Rabine. Gary Rabine is a board member of the indispensable Job Creators Network. He is one of the most successful small business entrepreneurs in the country. Gary, are you now a Florida or Illinois resident?
I'm Florida for 6.5 to 7 months and Illinois for about 4 months.
I think this is an important message because, as you know, Gary, this station, this flagship is in New York, and we have many, many, many listeners in New York City. And that is another high-tax state. But you and I both grew up in Illinois. I love the Chicago area. I think Chicago is one of the great cities in the world. It breaks my heart to see what's happened to that state and that city. And, we can't afford to live there any longer. You can't grow a business there any longer. So you are doing what so many people are doing and having to move your business and your headquarters out of Illinois to the state that just about everybody is moving to, Florida. What made you make that decision?
Well, the fact is the cumulative taxes in Illinois are higher than California or any state in America now.
Wait. Hold on. Say that again.
Yeah. The cumulative taxes of Illinois are the highest in America now.
Higher than California?
Higher than California. And what makes it higher than California, Steve, is California actually had the common sense, at least in the late 70s, to get to put their property tax with Proposition 13 at 1%. Illinois now is my property where I live is taxed at 4%.
4%.
My commercial
4% every year, right?
get this, my commercial properties were taxed at 10%, 10% of the value. Okay. So when you add those to the high gas tax and high income tax and all the other things, you end up to be the highest in America.
So it's kind of sad because you're. Oh, by the way, would you tell our listeners, because Gary is one of the great entrepreneurs. You're running one of the biggest construction pavement companies in the country now, and tell our folks how it started. I love this story. And, I think you said you did when you graduated from high school, you didn't go to college. You started this little business and it grew and grew and grew. And I just love it. So would you tell people how it happened?
Yeah, in 1981, graduated college and really didn't think college was for me, and started in the paving business out of high school. We were seal coat. We did seal coating of driveways and patching of driveways.
Did you do that kind of work yourself? Did you actually start out?
Yeah.
Doing...
No, I did it for somebody else through high school from the time I was 13 to 18 years old, and then for myself after that. But it was in your backyard where you grew up in the North Shore, where people had a little bit more money. That's where I started it. That's where we started it. And so today we're the largest the privately held commercial paving company in America. We pave thousands of parking lots across the country for big building owners and such, and we just have a blast doing what we do. But guess what? We're not going to want to grow our businesses anymore if communism happens, right? If Kamala becomes our president and her tax system goes in place, we will not want to grow our businesses any longer, and we're going to shrink. Like anybody, you're going to want to shrink your businesses because you're going to get taxed to grow your businesses.
So, and of course, if you shrink your business, that means fewer workers.
Yeah, of course, you're gonna lay good people off. The unemployment is going to go to the highest level we've ever seen if this woman wins as our president. And really, it's a matter. It's kind of like what Pritzker's done to Illinois, Kamala will do for the whole country. That's why Pritzker would have been the perfect VP candidate. Big, fat, and lazy, and never worked a day in his life.
Yeah,
right.
He inherited his money. Yeah.
Never worked a day in his life, but yet he's going to tell us how to live our lives and tax us until we leave. It's not again. So Illinois is a terrible case. It's a very good case study when it comes to if you don't like business and you don't like people that earn money, then just tax the hell out of them. Even the ones that love the state, like you and I, will eventually leave.
So I saw this story the other day about how we have this in our hotline. By the way, people should get our hotline. Just go to unleashprosperity.com and you can get this free newsletter every morning. And we had an item in there about how the Marxist mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, has now decided that he wants the government to run the grocery stores. That's good. How's that going to work out?
Well, when you okay, so and a lot of people probably know what happened there, but they're in a place in this great city of Chicago where I have a condo there that I love downtown that I used to use all the time. Don't use it often now, but bottom line is where that condo is at, the stores are all boarded up. Great stores and department stores and grocery stores all boarded up and not going to open anytime soon because of the treatment this goofy communist mayor and this crazy socialist communist governor have treated the state and the city by. But here's what's happened. So when you look at it used to be $500. If you steal less than $500 in the city of Chicago, you know what? You're not going to throw in jail. It's a misdemeanor. It's no big deal. They probably won't even bring you in. Now, because of inflation, they raised that to $999. With inflation, you got to do that, right?
You got to keep up with inflation.
You got to keep up with inflation.
Even the burglars have to keep up with inflation.
Exactly. But guess what happened then? Now all the grocery stores, the Walmarts, the good stores have left the great parts of the city. Down. So they have to put stores in run by the government. Well, guess what? It looks amazing. A lot like communist Germany, right? If you look at East Berlin and West Berlin, and one side of the wall, you had stores with one item you can buy. And you didn't have 5 or 6 selections. You had one thing you could buy, one generic thing. This is what it's going to look like in the city of Chicago, and it's a terrible thing. But this is what bad leadership is.
Yeah. What worries me, Gary, is that you've got. I really believe that if Kamala Harris wins, that the solution, because we've got all these, quote, price gougers out there, that, the government's just going to come in and run the drugstores and the grocery stores and the equipment stores and the hardware stores, because they'll be able to provide the stuff for you at a lower price, which of course I'm just joking. Well, I'm joking that they would provide a lower price, but I actually do think these idiots think that the government could run these stores better than people like you. So I'm going to ask you a personal question, Gary. Are you price gouging?
You know what? If making 5 or 6% net profit on the work you do is price gouging, boy, you know what? I guess we're price gouging. But guess, so again, I believe that business today, for us to compete, we've always had to be very, very efficient and very cost effective, and had to work off a low profit margin, right? So if all our businesses together do $350 million in revenues, okay, $350 million in revenues. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million of that. Actually, let's say $330 million of that gets injected back in the economy, and then the rest we reinvest in our business, right? Yeah. We keep very little. We keep salaries and some bonuses, but very little goes back to the employees, the leaders of that business, and the stockholders. We like growing the business and the value of the business, but if they tax like she says, she wants to tax unrealized gains. So guess what? We will have no incentive to continue to grow these businesses and reinject all this capital in the economy.
It's scary, actually. And, Gary, you've been such a successful businessman, and I think that a big problem is that when you look at the people at the top in the Democratic Party today, Joe Biden, who's the president, you've got Kamala Harris, who's going to be who is their presidential nominee. You've got Tim Wirtz, who is their vice presidential nominee. Those three, do you know how many years of business experience those three have?
They're a bunch of zeros, so I'm guessing zero.
I mean, zero. Really? I mean, here, let me use an analogy, and then and then I'd love your kind of response on this. If you got on an airplane and you walked onto the plane, and the pilot's saying, I don't really know how to fly this thing. Are you going to get on that plane?
Absolutely not. No, exactly. And you had the same thing in the Obama administration. The Obama administration, businesses retracted. We had challenges because all the regulation buildup. That's why I got involved when Bernie Marcus started this great organization, Job Creators Network. He called them the best economic mind he can find in you. He called in some small time CEOs like myself and said, let's start this thing and let's fight this crazy regulation that he's seeing. And boy, we all were psyched up about it because we knew there was a big need, and that organization's done great things ever since. But again, when Trump won, then guess what? It was like the clouds had lifted, and we had opportunities again, and businesses gained in value fast, right? Because everybody was doing business again. Walmart and the biggest companies in the country were investing now in improvements and doing things they weren't doing in the Obama administration. The same exact thing is going to happen. It has happened with Biden, and it's going to be 5 times worse with Kamala and this tax and spend thing that she wants to do to our country.
It is frightening, folks, and that's why I wanted to have Gary on to just explain from the ground floor about how you grow a business, how a business operates. I think you should be look, I'm being completely serious. I mean, you would be far, far, far more qualified to be president than Kamala Harris, who really, for example, when she talks about profit, these profit greedy corporations, she has no idea how hard it is to make a profit. You had probably some years where you didn't make a profit. Well, you're so good, maybe you didn't, but every company goes through some hard times, and you got to battle through those times.
We've gone through hard times, Steve, a few times in our careers, but I got to tell you, I look at my 15 companies right now that I have. Every single leader, even the smallest business I have, is way, way more qualified to lead our country than Kamala. Okay, because they have common sense, they understand budgets, they understand what it takes to make a profit, they understand how to serve the customer. Okay, as government leaders like Kamala, one thing Trump did, he served the customer. He drove lower taxes. He served the black community. He served the business community. Right? She's never served anybody or anything. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to say who she probably served, but there's rumors out there that she served a couple people, I guess, over the years, but not the way you and I believe is important. In business, you have to serve customers to keep them coming back. You have to do it at a competitive price, and you have to differentiate and create value. Okay, same thing we have to do in business, in government, in my opinion. We do in business already. She's never done that before. J.B. Pritzker, his fat butt, has never done that either before. Okay, this is why they're terrible at leading in government.
So my guest is Gary Rabine, who runs one of the largest paving companies in the country, has been an incredibly successful entrepreneur. He is a board member of Job Creators Network. I neglected to say, and so everyone knows, he is also a board member of Unleashed Prosperity and has been a big help to me in terms of the management of our organization as well. So, Gary, on the way out in our last minute and a half, I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked every one of our guests, and we'll do so through the election. I asked Newt Gingrich earlier on this show, if you were advising Donald Trump, and I know you've met Donald Trump and talked to him, what one or two pieces of advice would you give him? What should he be doing that he's not doing now? We have a race that is basically every poll is saying right now it's basically a tied race. I think Trump is going to win, but it's a tied race. What should he be doing differently? What advice would you give him?
So my advice would be really just stay to the points, the top 10 points that his staff believe are most important that his administration will excel at and her administration will fail at. And when I look at business, I got to tell you, we will have the highest tax. We'll be the highest tax country in the world to business and innovators. Okay,
that's right.
So what will happen?
You mean if she wins, we will.
If she wins, we'll be the highest tax country in the world. So big business will mass exit our America. Small business is going to suffer with less opportunity to grow and do business with those big businesses. Okay, then American innovation will evaporate. American innovation, and when we think about all the patents and all the innovation we've got in this country, this great country, the last 100 years, it'll evaporate. It'll be other places in the world, not America. Okay, unemployment will go up at all-time highs with this woman as our president. And lastly, most important, the terrible picture of poverty. The poverty in America will rise like it's not seen since the Great Depression. Okay, that's what I'm confident of if this woman is at the wheel of the greatest country in the world.
Great answer. And Gary Rabine, you are a superstar. What you do, you probably have hundreds of employees now. And the small businessman and women, I shouldn't really call you a small businessman anymore because it's not a small business, but, it's people like you that are the heartbeat of America. I hope you will come on again. That's Gary Rabine of Rabine Paving, member of the board of the Job Creators Network. Thanks so much, Gary, and we will be right back. This is WABC Talk Radio.
Thank you, Steve.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. My next guest is Tom Bevan of Real Clear Politics, who has his finger on the pulse of what's going on. Tom, I know you have a very busy afternoon. Thanks for carving out some time. Give our listeners a sense of how you think this race is looking. All the polls show it pretty much a toss-up right at this point. But I always say you have to really look at those battleground states to really know what's happening. What's your assessment, Tom?
Yeah, we just got a lot of battleground state data over the last 48 hours. Fox News polls, The Hill, Emerson College had some polls, Bloomberg, Morning Consult had some polls. And right now, if you take an average of the 7 battleground states, Harris is leading in those 7 battleground states by 0.5%. If you look at our electoral college map right now, if the election were held today and all of these polls were exactly spot on, which they're not going to be, but if they were, she would win the electoral college 270 to 268.
God,
so I think
that's amazing.
It's about as close.
So
as
it could come down to a couple of electoral votes.
Absolutely. I mean, this race is reminding me, Steve, a lot of 2016, and Harris has about a 1.8% lead in our national average. Hillary Clinton was at about 2%. And these battleground states are all really, really close. In fact, if you compare where Trump was in 2016 and definitely 2020 to where he is now, he's in a much stronger position. So on one hand, Harris has managed to make this back to basically a toss-up race. On the other hand, I think Trump is still, he's in a better position than he was 8 years ago and 4 years ago. So I think he's certainly got a very good chance at winning this race still.
So do you think that people really know that much about Kamala Harris at this point?
I don't, actually. And that's one of the things, I think there has been this, real push. Obviously, she's injected enthusiasm into the Democratic base. They were sort of moping about for weeks and months. Now they're excited. And with the help of the media, quite frankly, and the assist that they've gotten from the media, portraying her as the next coming of Obama, when just, a couple of months ago, they were writing stories about how Democrats were thinking about dropping her from the ticket.
Right.
It's been quite the reversal. And so, but she hasn't really done, this interview she did with CNN the other night was like the first time that she's actually answered questions. And I don't know that.
Wait, hold on. What questions did she answer?
I see what you did there, Steve. Yeah, but
hey, Tom, I'm still trying to figure out what she would do on her first day in office.
It's pretty remarkable, and so that's why I think this debate is going to be important, because it happens, and because it might be the only time where she has to stand on stage and really take hard questions from Trump and defend her record and defend her policy flip-flops and all of those things, because I'm not sure the media is going to do it.
So how important do you think authenticity is? Because, when you hear the word genuine and authenticity, that you don't think of Kamala Harris. I mean, she said, she's changed all her positions, but she hasn't changed her values. But this is kind of a boilerplate politician who just sticks her finger to the wind. And one day she's for this, the next day she's for the other side of it. Is that a problem for her?
Yes, I think it is, but I'm not sure it's going to end up being decisive. We'll have to see, because again, I think the media is sort of giving her a pass on that. So,
right.
It depends on, what independent voters, where they're getting their information, how they're receiving it, and how they react to it. So, the one thing is that I think authenticity is important, and that's one of the reasons that I think, Trump's base is as solid as it is. They like him. They think he's very authentic. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is that, the other side, they really do hate Donald Trump with a passion, and they're willing to give anybody a pass or forgo whatever to beat him. And I think Kamala Harris is certainly benefiting from that.
Okay, Tom, I know we only have a minute of your time left. So on the way out, I'm going to ask you a question I asked Newt Gingrich earlier on this show. If you were giving advice, I'm going to ask you about both. If you were giving advice to Kamala Harris, what would you advise her to do to win this race? And if you were giving advice to to Donald Trump, what would you advise him to do?
Wow, that's a good question. I think for Kamala Harris, to your point, I think she should, if she's going to, first of all, I think she should do more media. I don't know why she's so afraid, and why her handlers are so afraid of her being in front of the cameras. Mm-hmm. I would also tell her that she should own some of these flip-flops. I think the American public would be more forgiving of a candidate who said, you know what, that was
I changed my mind. Yeah.
I changed my mind. And here are the reasons that I changed my mind, as opposed to just lying to them and saying, I really didn't change my mind. And for Trump, I tell him I tell him what everybody else is basically telling him, which is, stick to the issues. He's ahead on all of the issues, and economy, inflation, et cetera.
Right.
And stay away from the personal stuff.
Yeah. That's a tough one, because, I've been around Trump for 9 years now, and I love the guy, but sometimes, sometimes less is more with Trump.
He does not understand that concept, for sure.
He sure doesn't. Well, Tom Bevan, I know you're really super busy. We'd love to call on you in the weeks to come as this race approaches Election Day. Have a great afternoon, my friend.
Happy to do it. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Folks, we'll be right back. That was Tom Bevan, by the way, of Real Clear Politics. This is the More Money Show.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. One quick point before we take our next break. I think I'm going to nominate for a Profiles Encourage Award. This is what the Kennedy family puts out every year. It's named after John F. Kennedy's famous book, Profiles Encourage. I'm going to nominate Cheryl Hines. Cheryl Hines is the wife of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Many of you know her as the comedic actor on the show, Larry David's very funny show, Curb Your Enthusiasm. She's a fantastic actress. She's a beautiful woman. I never met her, but I love her acting, and I love that show. But I thought it was amazing. She stood by her man. And when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said, I'm going to back Donald Trump, and I don't care if you like Trump or not like Trump, but I thought it was, she's in Hollywood and she's getting attacked. So she said, I stand by my husband's decision to do this. And she is being savagely attacked by Hollywood. All these people who say how tolerant they are of people with different views. But when Cheryl Hines stood by her husband, she was attacked mercilessly and viciously by these people who say what big hearts they have and how they're bleeding hearts and how they care about their fellow man. And how dare she do this, because doesn't she know that Donald J. Trump is against a woman's right to choose and is against abortion. Well, guess what? John F. Kennedy was a pro-life Democrat when those things existed. And so I don't take a position one way or the other on abortion. But what I'm telling you is I was so impressed with the fact that she stood up with her husband. And when she was asked, why would you do this? Why would you stand? Don't you know that Donald Trump is the worst tyrant that ever lived? And she said, it was a beautiful thing. She said, I love my husband. I would never do anything to hurt my husband. And I'm going to stand by him. And I respect that. So Cheryl Hines, and by the way, Cheryl said, because I've taken this position, I may never get an acting job in Hollywood again, but she did it anyway. That's a person who has got a lot of courage.
Talk Radio 77 WABC. It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. Hope everyone is having a wonderful weekend. I want to remind you, please, please, please go to unleashprosperity.com. Next time you're on your computer, unleashprosperity.com, and sign up for our daily hotline. We call it the Prosperity Hotline. I'm not selling you anything, folks. This is absolutely free. There's no advertising. I'm just advising you to get this because I think you'll really benefit from it. I think you'll learn a lot from it. And by the way, you can read this. I promise you can read this in 5 minutes every morning. It just is sometimes a chart, sometimes a cartoon, sometimes a short explanation of an economic idea or something crazy that a politician says. If you like the show, you'll love the hotline. I get a lot of the ideas for the show from the hotline, and it is absolutely free. Just go to unleashprosperity.com and give us your email, and we'll send it to you. And by the way, after a week or two, if you say, I don't like this isn't my kind of thing, you just unsubscribe. But I think you will. I mean, Newt Gingrich, who I had on the show earlier today, said it is one of the first things he reads every morning. I know even President Trump sees the hotline. He doesn't read it, but sometimes his aides will bring his attention to things we write about this. And I know many of the senators, congressmen, some of the top CEOs of the country. So I want you to get it. Go to unleashprosperity.com and get the hotline. And I love, by the way, hearing from folks. Please keep giving your comments. I try to improve this show every week. I'm kind of new to this game. And if you have a criticism, let me hear it. And I've learned a lot from your criticisms because you can always learn. And that's one of the life lessons. But if you like something about the show or you like one of our guests and you like to hear them on more often, absolutely. And this week we didn't have time to take calls, but and I think next week we will not be able to, but the week following that we will. I love to hear from you all, folks. I always brag to the others in this business that, I have great listeners. I have so many smart listeners. And I know you're smart because you call in and you have really smart comments and observations about what's going on in our country. This is Labor Day weekend, and I'm just going to make one last point before we hear from Bob and Ryan Payne about the financial situation, and that is this: Labor Day. I'm not exactly sure what Labor Day is really for, but I think it's to celebrate people who work in this country and have built our country with their hands or with their minds or with their intellect. And I want to tell you that we should celebrate the people who work hard in this country. I don't care if they're people cleaning up the bathrooms at the airport, or I don't care if they're the CEO of a great company, everyone who is working is contributing. And you have to have a purpose in life. You have to have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And this is a point that my buddy Larry Kudlow and I talk a lot about, is that there is dignity. There is dignity and there's meaning in work. And hard work, too. When we heard from Gary Rabine earlier, I thought it was fascinating. He never went to college, never took out a student loan. He right out of high school, while all his friends went off to college and studied, geography or studied, ethnic studies. He started a paving company, and now he is a multi-millionaire. He employs 1,000 people. And how did he learn the paving business? Well, guess what? When he was 17 years old, he started working for a company paving those driveways and paving those parking lots. And he learned how to do it. And there's no such thing as a dead end job. There really isn't. I hate that term, dead end job. There is no such thing. The only dead end job is not working at all. That's a dead end, I guarantee you. So for young people, if you're a teenager, your young 20s, if you're in college, work. There's no law that says you can't work 10 or 15 or 20 hours while you're in school. I did it my last 2 years in school, and I learned, sometimes I learned more on the job than I did from my classes. If you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s and you're of sound mind and you're in good health, and I know some people are disabled and can't work, but if you can, look, you really want to play golf every day? I mean, I love to play golf. I'd love to play, and I try to actually get out 2 or 3 afternoons a week for 9 holes of golf. But, if you can work, you will be happier. And here's the other thing, folks. Every study now shows that when you continue to work, even as a senior citizen, and as I said, I just turned 64, but I'm not going to, at least for the next 10 years, I'm not going to retire unless, I become mentally unfit. But the studies show the longer you work, the healthier and the longer you live. It's science, because you have a purpose. You have a reason to get up in the morning and you want to contribute. And we need all hands on deck. We got real economic problems. We got to produce more in this country. So we're not getting everything from China and countries that hate us. And so I'm saluting to especially the people. I have a friend who's 94 who's still working. 94, he's still working. And the guy's healthy. And I think it's what makes his mind sharp. So, get a job. If you're not working, get a job. They're out there. I mean, the economy's not great, but there are jobs out there. And get a skill. For young people, get a skill. Figure out how to do things. People with skills are well paid. Folks, have a great Labor Day. This is the More Money Show. We'll be back next week. And let's keep this country free and prosperous.
Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Ryan Payne and Bob Payne back again on the More Money Show. From Payne Capital Management, of course, that's Payne, talking about the markets, the economy, and your retirement. All right, it's the tipping point. This is where we pinpoint the pain point. That's Payne, having the biggest impact on your wealth right now. And guys, I've seen lots of headlines lately talking about, is the 60-40 portfolio dead? And of course, 60-40 means 60% in stocks, 40% bonds, which is supposed to be this like tried and true allocation. If you have it, it should be the recipe for success and financial independence over the rest of your life. So what do you think? Should I just put my money blindly in a 60-40 allocation, or is it dead now?
Right, I'm really glad you clarified that 60-40 is an allocation and not the amount that you work. But yeah, I mean, I think the 60-40 is like the 4% rule. It's a rule of thumb. And, what is a 60-40 portfolio anyway? What does it consist of?
I don't know, Chris. That's why I pay you the big bucks so I can go on vacation and enjoy my 60-40 lifestyle. 60% rest, 40% guiding you, one would say is enough. But no, that's a great point, right? So 60% in stocks, what stocks? 40% in bonds, what bonds? And why 60% stocks, 40% bonds?
I'll tell you what, that whole rule of thumb, the 60-40 portfolio doesn't work anymore, coupled with the 4% withdrawal rate. That's great clickbait. But, is there a reason why they always choose the S&P 500 in these articles over the last 15 years, guys?
Because it's done the best.
Exactly.
The last 15 years. But we forget, right? From 2000 to 2010, you made no money owning the S&P 500. And that drives me crazy. Think about that. If you retired in the year 2000, you put all your money in the S&P 500, by the end of that decade, you would have made no money and you've been drawing from your portfolio. And I think most of us, when we're building our portfolio right now, don't realize that because it's been such a good run. And what scares me is a lot of you right now, you're invested with a lot of your money just in the S&P 500. And great right now, but might not be so great in the future.
Well, wait a minute, Ryan. The S&P 500 has 500 stocks. That's really well diversified, right?
Well, it is if you only own one, I guess. It's if you're just talking math here, Chris, I think you're absolutely right. But yeah, I don't think it's just the investor's fault. How many portfolios have we reviewed recently, proposed portfolios, where I know every advisor shows these investors the quilt chart, right? The difference of performance of different asset classes year over year, but they come in 100% invested in the S&P. So who's at fault here? Is it the investor or is it the purveyor of investment products?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I did a proposal for a prospective client recently, and this person was in a 40% tax bracket, and he had treasury bonds in his 60-40 portfolio. I mean, a very simple solution to that would be to use something like a municipal bond where that income is tax-free. That's a big savings.
It is a big savings, guys. And it's, let's face it, building an asset allocation is both an art and a science, right? The science is easy. Anybody can look at past performance. Anybody can look at the 100-year performance of different asset classes. But there's an art to how to build a portfolio. And what really matters is the buy-in from the investor. If the investor buys into the strategy, they'll stay invested, right? And hey, we're at 41,000 on the Dow. What happened when we hit 18,000 4 years ago? Did everybody have the courage to stay invested in their strategy?
A lot of times the panic button was getting pressed. We know. But no, I think it's a really good point. And I think the problem is investing is all about nuance, right? The devil is in the details. Yet when you hear advice, blanketed advice for the media, you tend to get these like broad rule of thumbs that you can utilize, and it just doesn't work in practicality. Like to your point, Chris, if you're in a high tax bracket right now, what type of bonds do you want to own for your, let's say, 40%? Is it taxable bonds, tax-free bonds, right? So they're all questions you have to ask yourself. And if you have money in equities and you need to draw from your portfolio in retirement, would it make sense not to have everything in the S&P 500? Because the S&P 500 is very concentrated, great when it's going up, but what if it goes down like it did 2 decades ago when you retire? These are the variables you really have to consider when you're building that financial independence plan.
Well, Ryan, I think on that point, I think a better name for this article would be, is your 60-40 portfolio dead? Do you own the right things? Are you diversified? Are you owning the proper bonds based on where you are from a tax standpoint? And will it help you succeed for your long-term financial plan?
Well, that brings up another really good point. Is should you even have 60% in stocks, right? Because as you get close to retirement, or if you're retired right now, a 60-40 portfolio still can go down a lot in a bear market. In fact, back in 2008, that portfolio would have been down like 25%. So, you really have to determine, should you be 60-40, 50-50, 30-70 based on what your goals are, not based on, again, a blanketed rule of thumb. That's another major mistake I see most investors making.
Guys, I think the whole key here is it takes a lot of time and effort. And, if I'm a client, why would I want to spend all my time and effort doing what we do? So it's really important to understand, how different things are performing at the time. And you have that sequence of return risk, right? So if all your eggs are in one basket, and when you need that money to live on, you're selling low, as opposed to being able to take the yield from your portfolio or take what's up out of your portfolio. It's kind of like, when you have a garden, right? You're able to reap what's ripe, as opposed to pulling the new plants up by the roots.
So about what you're really saying is diversification is just having a garden with lots of different plants in it. Simple.
Well, only a garden that works when it's well tended to, right? This is not something you can just make it up and then forget about it, right? It's something where you have to monitor it every single day.
Bob, the Farmer Wealth Advisor, I love it. Sign me up.
It's an agrarian science. You guys never knew that, did you?
If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, myself and Bob and our team at Payne Capital will run for you our total financial master plan, and we'll do that with no obligation or cost. It's a full holistic review. We literally look at everything. There's not a firm out there that will do this work up front. We go as far as building you your own personalized financial portal. We give you a bird's eye view of your entire financial life, and we'll hone in on every financial issue you need to address today, whether it's that income plan for retirement. How do you take Social Security? There's a lot of ways to take it, but one right way for you. How do you draw from your portfolio the most tax-efficient way? We'll give you a full income plan, factor in inflation so you don't run out of money. We're going to look at diversification. Markets have been all over the place, up and down. Has your portfolio been extremely volatile? Or have you been sitting in cash? Paralysis by analysis, can't figure out what to do. We'll put together a full diversified investment game plan, show you how to grow your wealth, tie it to your goals, but most importantly, protect it over the rest of your life. And we're going to look at fees and taxes. Wall Street loves to sell you high cost, tax inefficient products, whether it's an annuity, mutual fund, insurance product, brokerage product. We're going to go through every investment you have, deep dive. We're going to show you how to reduce all the internal costs and optimize your portfolio for taxes. It's not what you make, it's what you take. You'll get our full tax playbook. We literally have 4 slots left. If you saved over $1 million for your retirement, all you need to do is call or text at 844-752-6692. That's 844-752-6692. If you call or text us right now at 844-752-6692, that's 844-PLAN-NYC, 844-PLAN-NYC.